Welcome to Implicating the Real. My name is Michael. I'm joined as always by my good friend Joe. Joe, how are you?
I'm good.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Been a little break. Listener may not notice, but the lag of time between, when we're recording this and when it comes out, it'll creep through in certain senses.
Mm-hmm.
We're also joined by our good friend Liana. Liana, how are you?
Great.
Great. Good to have you.
Yeah, welcome.
As excited, we're going to finish up chapter 11 of Seth Speaks. I mean, hopefully finish up. If not,
I always love taking a long break in the middle of a chapter.
it was interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's not ideal, but all these ideas I feel like are so repeated throughout and interconnected that where is even a good place to take a break?
Right.
When it comes to some of these.
Do you remember where we were at last time?
I think the last thing we kind of commented on is that we were all in one-way thought forms, or started as thought forms. Do you guys remember? So that's on the bottom of 155. I'll just read. That'll be maybe a repeat of something I said last time. They will grow in consciousness and continue their own lines of development on different levels. In one way, we are all thought forms, and this will be further explained in the material dealing with the God concept. Remember, you asked what about that term, the God concept.
Oh, yeah.
So we read that.
Did we talk in depth about that? Because I thought that was one of the weirdest things in this chapter.
The thought form thing?
Yeah.
That we are all thought forms?
That we started out as thought forms.
Oh. I
brought it up and I don't think that was towards the end. So I think we had a hard out and yeah, we can get back into it. He starts off saying this because the way some people are dealing with their afterlife is that they're doing that kind of life edit thing and they're reliving situations.
Right.
And it says, under these conditions, the personality manipulates events consciously, of course, and studies the various effects. The focus demanded is quite intensive. He's told of the nature of those who participate with him. He realizes they are thought forms, for example, and his own. But again, thought forms do possess a certain reality and consciousness. They are not cardboard actors for him to simply push around at will. He must therefore take them into consideration, and he has a certain responsibility toward them. So I'm glad you're asking about this because this hit me as pretty mind-blowing when I first came across it, but it's been repeated so much in my studies that it's the impact is lessened a little bit.
Just the fact that you have the idea of having a responsibility towards your thought forms is it seems very wide ranging, it seems it really changes the landscape of your responsibilities towards other people when you start, including hypothetical, not actual people as things you have responsibilities towards,
To me, it gets out of this false dichotomy of either we have this objective reality we're all actually separate, or it's solipsism and we can actually treat others however badly we want because they're a part of ourselves, but it's actually I wouldn't say it's in the middle, but it's somewhere
right,
combining both of those concepts, or the analogy that I go back to often is children, thought forms, something you create, in this sense, you're creating them, but they're their own thing too. People have this thing, this gets back to something you're talking about, just with your family and the way you're raised, a lot of parents identify strongly with their children, but there are their separate selves, and the same thing is happening with thought forms, and I think he'll even allude later to the entity has this sort of relationship with the reincarnational selves, outer ego, earthly identities that they create.
Mm-hmm.
That they Seth says I don't have a strong emotional bond with those selves anymore. They've gone on their own way, kind of thing. But this idea that this is happening at every level, that everything that's created continues in its own existence. And for a time, we like share an identity,
Right.
to whatever extent that's advantageous.
There's like this like budding like process of consciousness that it like kind of buds off and then splits.
And to me, that's why he says, like, to some extent, we all were thought forms at one point.
So do these thought forms, like, hypothetically, would we say that those have like an internal experience? Like, if you are a thought form in someone else's, like, what would you call it? Like past life experience, like you kind of like are in that experience with an internal consciousness, like an internal experience of what it is to be that thought form. Like there is like a self there.
Yeah, I think it's just all consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And it's coming from this like physical objective in air quotes perspective that we have trouble with it, but it's just all consciousness. It's all created. Everything has its own free will. And, you know, the probabilities, you know, the density of the breadth of probabilities makes it possible for everything to have free will and just to, you know, completely morph through this. I don't even know how to describe it. Just like intensity of consciousness.
The thing that it immediately makes me think of, I don't know if I asked you this the last time that we talked, but I wonder if you ever think about that in terms of like your writing, you know? Like, do you feel like there's a responsibility that you have as an author to like your like characters in the same sort of way?
Yeah, well, I have the experience that I feel like a lot of creators have is like that their characters like have their own will. Like they're kind of like telling me as much as I'm telling them, you know, like, and then I do get a little bit, I mean, you know me well enough maybe, but like I do get a little bit meta where they're like, you know, like I'll make a character that's a writer, that's creating characters, that's questioning this very thing. Like, is it morally acceptable for me to like force my character to do this?
Right. Like if you write a story and then halfway, like you write a whole bunch and you put a lot of your consciousness and intention into this character who has this relationship with like a parent or something. And it's like, do I have a responsibility to this character that I can't just write the last chapter as like their parent dies, right? Like, do I have a responsibility to like write them through that process so they can get resolution, you know?
Yeah, you can think of it that way, but like I think the morality to me isn't so much as like doing nice things for the character as so much as being true to what you kind of develop a feeling for like what that character's will is. And I think as we see when we go along, you know, like Seth is going to explain our own intentionality with like our own hard knocks and death and pain and stuff. It's at some level we're choosing these things. And so in the same sense, like a character can be making these choices. And thankfully, because I feel like, you know, without any challenge or struggle, you know, fiction is pretty boring. You know, no one reads books that it's just a bunch of happy things happening usually.
That's true. Yeah, like the greater sin would be to like write them into some like doing something that you're like, they would never do that.
Yeah. Well, then Seth is even going to comment on that when we talk about the strong belief in heaven. He comments that it's kind of sterile and boring.
I like that quote a lot.
Yeah. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, I guess I should read some of your writing about that with like the whole meta thing. That's like super interesting. The idea of like, I'm writing a character that's writing a character that's like, wait, how's my relationship to this character?
Yeah.
Yeah, then the next part is there's like a whole sort of like, there's the Rob thing. I think we talked about that last time a little bit. We get into the Rob like in where are they, like Denmark or something?
Is the past life that often gets referenced is, this Denmark life where Jane was his son and Seth was a friend or an acquaintance.
A friend, yeah.
Yeah.
And the Seth friend was like a minor artist that like traveled around a lot. And then Rob was an artist that ended up getting some money and settled down.
Right.
Seth wasn't an artist. He was like a spice merchant.
Okay.
But he's talking about that Rob, he splits up this existence into two periods, but they're part of the same life. But like he splits them up because at first Rob is like an artist and this is interesting. Like, it makes a lot of sense. I just never thought about it, but like a lot of what artists were doing that back then was like they get like free room and board for like you to paint a portrait of the farmer's wife, and then you just make your way that way. And Rob was successful enough that he could buy some land. He became a farmer, and it reminds me of like I was that smart ass before I bought a house that would tell all my friends that were buying a house like, the things you own are gonna end up owning you. And then I'd buy my own house. But it sounds like he was just kind of didn't have enough time for painting, or didn't make enough time for painting.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like a different period in his life, and maybe he was a little bitter about that, or
I find that really interesting because
yeah,
Seth says that Rob started to envy after he got land. He started
His
to envy his
friends.
traveling artist friends.
yeah,
Meanwhile, in this life, as Rob, he envies his landlord for owning land because he wishes he could. And if you read the personal sessions, like Seth keeps
Yeah.
telling him, you can't be jealous of your landlord because your landlord has this whole host of problems that you don't have because you're renting.
right.
It's like he forgot his other life.
Well, that's so mad in the other life. He's like, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna be an artist. Damn it.
Yeah.
And it seems like he had like some negative belief that you can't do both.
Right.
Like, I mean, I'm sure it's difficult, and I'm a very busy person with all my responsibilities, but I'm striving to do both. But yeah, trying to at least make my beliefs help me instead of hurt me in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Another little detail I found interesting. Well, first of all, it says you thought you would settle down and paint on your fine farm, but instead you turned into a farmer, and a lecherous one at that. So it's just kind of like shifted gears.
So it's like, I was waiting until your next lifetime, buddy, because I didn't want to be mean back then. But like, man, you're kind of a dick.
But what Seth says about his life, he's like, that was my last full reincarnation, adopted then because I loved the sea, and it served a strong purpose of spreading ideas from one country to another. The men who traveled with me also took part in the seeding of ideas. We spread them about the world as it was known. So even back then, Seth is like, has this passion for like teaching, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like he's very like ideas oriented in terms of like what his plans are for his life.
I'd be curious if he went into like what sort of ideas he was spreading back then.
Yeah, well, he said that he's like a spice merchant, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then, I know it's easy for us now to like look at colonialism in a strictly negative light, but like, I think Seth comments elsewhere that like, this is also part of like the exchange of ideas around the world,
Yeah. It's like, I was thinking about that because there's that interesting phrase in that quote you just read where he like talks about like the world as it was known then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that whole idea of like, if the reality that we're like going into is like created by like our plans and our perceptions for like what it's going to be like when we reincarnate into it, there's that interesting idea of like there were geographic spaces on the earth that were so cut off from one another that it's like you presume that like if you're going to be reincarnating onto the earth in that period of time, you're like, oh, these are like different like worlds of existence,
Yeah.
like they actually can't merge like in whatever lifetime, like during that part of history.
I'm gonna take that as a chance to jump off on a little tangent here.
Yeah.
I re-listened to our last conversation, and I think you brought up somewhere that because we were talking about reincarnation, that like some people like whole towns will like reincarnate together. And it reminded me of this, and I couldn't find anything explicit about, this town actually reincarnating together. But have you ever read the personal sessions?
I read like just smatterings of all of them, yeah.
So there was some like news event, during Robin James' life that this town in Italy, like this high village town that was like cut off from everybody, like suffered a earthquake.
Oh.
and like the whole town basically was swallowed up.
Wow.
And so like Seth is talking about that, and he's talking about how they were of this different psychological mindset that like the world had kind of passed them by. They were isolated, and maybe I don't know if they were like strictly, like a same group of people reincarnated, but like I was kind of getting some similar vibes, but I just want to read a little bit of this. So this is from the Personal Sessions, book 5, the very, very end. These were unlettered people in a fashion. In this latest disaster, they took their land with them in their death. The land, that is the environment, and the consciousness in your terms of the people were part of each other in such a strong fashion that their energies merged to bring about the earthquake conditions. You had a mass burial, land and people together, a folding in of consciousness upon itself, of energies upon energies, as those people realized that their kind of existence could no longer be maintained. Those who survived reacted in the old fashion, sweating to build again, refusing better shelter, but the times had indeed changed. The balances of nature, culture, communication, transportation had altered to such a degree that a real poverty had resulted. Not simply simple, basic, this sentence doesn't really make sense. Not simply simple, basic, but adequate living conditions. The people compared themselves to the rest of the world at times, and many of the young people were beginning to leave. But those villages were again like those in the times of Nabin and the Roman soldier. So he's connecting it to another past life that Rob talks about, the Nabin character.
That idea is so metal.
Yeah.
The like, we're just gonna go out and we're just gonna like wrap the whole like earth over this town, and we're like done with it. We're like destroying the whole thing.
It's like a death of an old culture, death of a town.
Yeah.
It's like, our time's come and gone. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I like that a lot.
Sorry, but that was a little tangent. Yeah.
No, that's such a good quote.
Yeah, I just like the idea that they were like so entwined with like their land and their ways that like it just all had to end. It just did. All right, so does that bring us to the appendix? I think it's just a little more about
because
Rob stuff.
Rob ends up kind of confused about some of the stuff from the description that Seth is giving, and then Seth has to like clarify in like a later session that's like in the appendix.
What was interesting to me about the appendix is Seth kind of explained some of the difficulties of what he's doing in like talking about these old times. Did you guys pick up on that?
I had a thing about it, but we can get into it in a second.
Yeah, I mean that's the point of being critical, I guess, if you're critical of this. The details that so concern you now are, of course, important, and yet in a larger way, it is the deep emotional experience of your life that is later remembered. Basically, the names and dates are meaningless to the inner self. Therefore, in reincarnational data, the emotional values will come through more vividly with much less distortion. You place upon names and dates an importance you presently find of critical import. You insist upon them to add to the validity of past life narratives, yet these are precisely those things that are forgotten first and that have the least psychological value. Certain names will therefore spring into immediacy. You insist that the names be neatly placed, and yet often the inner self has great difficulty in this regard, for names simply do not matter. Persons and events of meaning carrying strong emotional charges will come through far clearer. Dates are associated with emotional events will also be recalled. The past life is like a crossword puzzle that must be put together, but at its center is the emotional reality from which the puzzle springs. It's kind of validated some of my experiences in like history class where I could not get names and dates. It's like part of me just thought like this is stupid.
Yeah.
But this is also surprising to me because I guess I make these assumptions that like the higher part of myself, the inner self, just has all this information, but yet there's some value for it to like forget.
Yeah, and it almost seems like maybe like if we're talking in like a probability space, like there's things that are key to the experience and things that are like very like secondary to the experience, where it's like, well, you had this experience and like what the name of the guy that you met was not the important thing. So like in the smattering of realities that all cluster around this experience, he probably just had like a bunch of different names, but like it doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah. It's the inner self is like what it's taking from these experiences is like some emotional values that like build your character. Later he mentions like how like you don't remember parts of your early childhood, but like that those emotional realities have informed the character that you become.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't need to remember like, you know, what color your favorite shirt was when you were 3, unless it was of great emotional value for some reason.
No, I think about that a lot in interacting with kids.
Yeah.
You're like, you really get like a lot of your worldview like etched onto you in a way that you don't think about consciously. You know, like a lot of people's like moral, like their value system like comes from an age that they don't even really remember.
Yeah.
But like it's so important to them when they get older.
Yeah. But to me, it was interesting in the context of like we both, I think, expressed, or maybe you've had the same experience of just being like so caught up with like facts and truth and like devaluing like emotional part of it. But like we can point to these examples as like, oh yeah, this psychological value, these emotions are like actually what's really valuable when it comes to, you know, our own selves and our higher self.
Yeah. It's what people respond to, right? It's like you have to be able to meet them at their emotional like reality.
Yeah, it's what's most important. Like I think we all recognize that when we think about like the most important things in our life are like, you know, the love we have for our families and et cetera, you know.
My only gripe is like, so Seth starts off like telling Rob about all this stuff, and Seth like spends half of a page just being like, oh, the name of this guy's like, it starts with an M, it's like M-A, and then this other thing, or maybe it's Ma, this thing, or maybe I'm pronouncing it this other, and Seth spends so much time talking about it, and I'm like, dude, you can't spend so much time talking about how the name and then turn around and be like, okay, Rob, well, the name doesn't even really matter. So, like, why are you so focused on it? It's like, bro, you're the one who's telling him about the past life. If you care about something else, just tell him about the other thing, you know?
I think part of that might have been to show like, hey, look, I'm this, well, not all knowing, but a lot knowing entity, and I can't even remember the damn names that we lived as.
Yeah.
Like he's struggling to spell these out.
He's trying to give Rob what he wants to.
Yeah, I think Rob also wants to know.
Because what they want to do is be able to like look it up and cross-reference it with this reality. You know?
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, they do a lot of these psychic experiments where it just never really gets much farther than that, you know?
Mhm.
Like they do these envelope tests and other psychic tests, and it's a part where like I feel like most of like seasoned Seth readers just kind of like skip over that part of the session when it comes up.
Yeah, because like Jane and Rob, for them, it's very important to be able to like prove that this is like a real phenomenon.
Yeah, they had like an insecurity about what they were doing, and they wanted that validity, I feel like.
That would kind of suck if you were like, you know, you're gonna come like teach some people some stuff, and you're like, hey, what's up? And they're like, whoa, hold on a second, we got to ask you a bunch of yes or no questions real fast, and you're like, oh my god, no, please.
Yeah. Here's Seth says, in my particular case, I am so unfocused on my own reincarnational selves that they have gone so far on their own that I have little feeling of immediacy. Since we, Seth, Jane, and I, have been so involved, however, those relationships remain important, and in your terms, our present relationship was latent then. So he's just kind of saying, like, even at wherever stage he's at, he's kind of like, he doesn't have this immediacy, this emotional connection with those selves. Like he's, like I was saying, like he's gotten that emotional development out of them, and they've gone their own way, just like the thought forms, and they're doing their own development.
Basically just being like, yeah, sorry, dude, I don't remember.
Yeah. He also says, this brought up to mind, like I kept going back to the term I picked up on a previous chapter, the point of reference, and we were using that as our dreams were kind of a point of reference for like all these avenues that we can access through them.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it's just until we understand those larger avenues and where they go, calling it dreaming is kind of a catch-all, that it's a point of reference for that. And I thought the same thing, because he's talking about it will do no good to ask deep questions concerning the history of the times of some personality who was impoverished, ignorant, and limited. He will simply not know the answers. The picture of any given life, therefore, usually comes through the experience of the personality who lived it. So, like, to reach this information, I don't know how Seth is doing it, not even being one of his own personalities, but like, even if you were like an inner self, you're connecting, you have to go through that self. And if they're not capable of articulating names and dates, then you're not going to be able to.
Right.
Because they're just like, let's go back to like the video game analogy. You're just this character in the video game, if you don't care about some detail, like, it's not going to come through probably, right?
Yeah. And like, that's like one of those facts about history, right? Is like, the people who are living through significant events a lot of times don't understand them in the same way that we do, like after the fact. So like asking them like, oh, you were part of this like really important thing that happened. It's like, oh, was that important? Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I really wasn't paying attention. Like, sorry.
I mean, people have their own priorities, right? Yeah.
It's also like their own stance. Like on Inauguration Day, it's going to be the best day of the year for some people, and for other people, it's going to be the worst day of the decade. Like, it's, you can't really get objective fact about historical time from individual people with different belief systems.
But like, history up to this point seems like it gets written one way more than it gets written as like, for a lot of people it was this, and for a lot of people it was this.
Yeah, right.
We don't get a lot of context in our history classes, I feel.
There's a lot of narrativization that goes on with it,
I also think it's literally different for different people in the most literal sense, because sorry, listener, but like, I think Mark had sent out some excerpt recently to our book club, like, email discussion group, where he was, pretty sure this was from Mark. He was saying that, like, at some point shortly before Rob's mom died, Rob and this mom had met physically in her nursing home for Rob. And Rob was like, yeah, you're in a nursing home. And he had Jane there, and there was a nursing home employee. But his mom thought that she was in her other son's house in Rochester. And Seth said, like, for her, she was in that home, and for you, you were in a nursing home, and you both humored each other, where, Rob, you were like, oh my God, this woman doesn't even know where she is.
Yeah.
Fine, we're in so-and-so's house. And then, his mom was thinking, oh my God, my son is so bright. For some reason, he thinks I'm in a nursing home when I'm in my son's house. And they both just kind of humored each other. And Seth basically said they were both valid. Your probable worlds, like, met there for you to have that interaction. But it was like literally different presence, and presumably like different histories.
And our medical model would call her, she has some sort of dementia, right? And Seth really like turned that on its head for me when he started, he just says that, like, a lot of times what's happening is these people are like changing focus, and it's not like, I guess they're like letting go of like root assumptions that like connect us to this reality.
I think so. And they're starting to bleed through and see the other probable realities. But like, he's also said in a different section, I think a completely different book, that when Rob's family thought the mother was senile for having different memories, Seth said she wasn't senile. The memories were valid. They were the memories of the probable woman she was. Like, she was from a different probable reality, and she came into this one, and those were her real memories. But that was not your past, you guys' past in this reality. And so, like, when you realize that people just traverse different timelines, what is history?
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the most far-fetched things I've come across in Seth, is this idea that you can change your past. But like, in that same way, when you're traveling through probabilities, like, you're just kind of connecting with like a development that would have got you to that point. So like, you just somehow you make this horizontal move, and then there's like a new history that's just like supporting you. You just sit in the same chair you're at, you think of what happened, and like, it's there. Like, that past isn't necessarily like, that's why the present has this like ultra value to reality versus like the past or the future, because
Mhm.
those are just like connective tissue that orients you in your consciousness more than they're real.
Well, and so much of it is also like based off of just sort of collective agreement, like
Yeah.
if you're the person who like really does remember, like, no, I had this experience in my life, and every other person in your family is like, you're making that up, that's not true. It's like, well, which one of us is to say, right? Like you simply have the majority of people, but like, what does that mean,
Well, yeah, and so we think of dementia as like a weakness, but for some people at the end of their life, they're like, they maybe had this realization. They're like, oh, I need to start exploring these other areas. This part of my reality is winding down. I need to like, it actually might be a development in that sense that our culture almost doesn't recognize at all.
Our culture does not recognize it. Yeah, he said that other cultures don't see the symptoms of what we call dementia as a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder, like, what kind of society could you live in where people like see these experiences as like valid and something to like value in like older people, of like, oh, this is like a sign of like their wisdom,
Yeah.
that like they can access these things that I like couldn't,
Mm-hmm.
And maybe for you guys too, but for me, like growing up in this culture, like it never even crossed my mind that possibility.
Right.
Like, I feel like the culture would be so different just if these ideas were just there for us to at least like consider them and dismiss them, but we've never even, for people like born into a culture that like has these like strict views of viewing reality, like you don't even get that consideration. You like, it takes something like this to like crack your mind open.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I used to fear it a lot as my parents aged, and I've worked kind of with people who deal with elder law, and sometimes they tell me about either clients that I've known that are like undergoing dementia, and all they can say is like it's super tragic, and I'm like, well, she's just preparing to like move on.
Yeah.
I can't say that to them, but like graduation is not a tragic thing. It may look really messed up to us, but she's undergoing this journey that we all have to take, and it's harder for her because of our society's rigid views.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't see it as dementia. We'd just be like, oh, she's opening up to all the probabilities now that we can't see. Like, good for her.
Well,
Clap, clap.
if it was like a 3-year-old, like, just using their imagination, we'd entertain them. We'd encourage it. But since it's like, it's a 92-year-old, it's like talking what we call nonsense. It just has to be dismissed.
So yeah, because there's a lot of negative emotions that go along with like having dementia, right? Like there's a lot of like emotional heightened emotional states and like confusion and stuff like that.
Right.
And it's like it does sort of make you wonder, like, does that come from sort of them interacting with realizing like, oh, I'm not acting like quote unquote correctly,
Yeah. Well, I
Or
mean,
does it come from other things?
how many of those people experiencing it have already experienced that other side of it when they were the kids of an elderly parent?
Right.
They already have this like belief framework laid down, and they're just like, in this sense, it is tragic because it is our like negative belief that's carrying them into it.
Well, and losing touch with like your sense of self has to be like very difficult. Right?
Yeah, if you feel like you're losing control or you have these rigid ideas of what afterlife could be, you're afraid of like anything other than what you normally know as your egotistical life, right?
It's also that they're surrounded by people who are like poo-pooing, and I'm telling them like, no, you are in a nursing home, or like,
Yeah.
no, this is your, they're just invalidating all of your experiences because they don't think that it could be possible. They
Right.
think your brain is rotting when it's not.
Well, and just think how much like say these like the elderly children of an even more elderly parent, like how much of their grief and fears are like projecting onto that parent and making them experience it in that sense rather than like
Exactly.
they could just be like silly having a good old time. They could be talking to their deceased husband or something and laughing, and then you're surrounded by people that are just like sad and afraid.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the, Seth says there's thought transmission constantly. So these people are picking up on your pity and despair for them when it's not a thing to pity or despair over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if it already came across, but like I always liked Seth's quote about death. Like if I had known then what I know now about death, every death would be an adventure. You know,
Right.
I hope I remember that one when I'm nearing that stage. You know, it's got to be a little bit scary, but if you have some like positive beliefs helping you along, it's more of like something you're choosing. You know,
Yeah.
like when I climb sometimes, like it's pretty scary, but like it's in a way that I'm like willing and thrilled about, and I know it's going to be a good experience. You know, hopefully death can be more like that instead of like this tragic sadness.
I think everyone wants their death to be like meaningful, you know? Like there's that sort of like joke about like every man has like one of like 4 daydreams, and like one of them is like the heroic last stand where you're standing with all your buddies and like you're making like this like big like emotional thing right before you die, right? And it's like, because how embarrassing would it be to just die in like a stupid way, you know?
Yeah, I would agree, except for the every part.
Yeah,
With everybody.
not everybody.
Yeah, that doesn't resonate. I'm sitting here like, is that just a man thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're gonna come up to the part where Seth's talking about suicides too, but that reminds me, one of the curious quotes in that section was like that some people kind of like basically commit suicide and still live. Like they just cut themselves off from like doing anything fun or adventurous, or we'll get to the quote, but like,
Isn't there another famous quote about that? It's like I pity the fact that like some men like die at the age of 20 and are like pronounced dead like at the age of like 45 or something like that. I don't know.
I'm sure there is. I don't know if I'm familiar, but that's something that comes up in Castaneda too. Don Juan says that most people, I think he uses like a very young age, but he's like most people are like senile, like in their 20s. Like they're just kind of like set in their ways, and they're just gonna go through the motions, and then they're just not. There's no like vitality. I should try to find the way he puts it, and it might be a cool like counterpoint. But
they go like spiritually dormant. I think that's like so interesting because like part of me feels like that has to have come out of like sort of like, because was Castaneda writing in like the 80s? And let's
same time as this.
Yeah,
started in the 60s and then 70s and into the 90s.
Because like I feel like at that time there was that like really depressing sort of like you get channeled into like your like experience of like workplace culture, like you just do your job for the rest of your life and then that's it, like the suburbification of like the American working middle
by the
class.
time you're like 24, you're married with 2 kids and you have the same job you'll have the rest of your life. And
that's like Gen X had the whole thing of like being like, holy shit, this is soul destroying, But it's like the quote I'm thinking of, I think comes from a person who was writing like a long time before that, like hundreds of years before that, right? Where it's like, this is a thing that's not just particular to this part of like American society, but like a sort of more like universal experience of like, no, there are a lot of people who just sort of like get into a groove and then they just like, that's just what they think life is,
Yeah, you kind of have to make it a point to take initiative for yourself, Like I compare it to the physical. Like when you age physically, one of the first things that goes is your flexibility. And it's a sign that you should probably pay attention to your body and do some things. And I feel like that probably applies also like psychologically. Once you lose sort of like a psychological flexibility, you're living a narrow life after that, And for a lot of people, I think they're on this like path of senility, and then some big event like shakes it up for them. And that's where like people can look back and say like, oh, this tragedy that happened to me when I was, 32 is the best thing that ever happened to me, because now I do this and I do this. And, for some people, that's the path. It's like the hard lesson comes and smacks them in the face.
Yeah. I mean, part of me, I feel like there's some truth to it, but I feel like there's so much more to the story too when we talk about like people sort of like getting stuck in like the way that they're living. Like I feel like so much of like our culture is about people trying to shake that out loose and not being able to, you know? Like there's
Shake what up?
like I feel like there's so many different things. Like if you like just watch like actual TV that has like advertisements, right? There's so many things that are advertised to people in the middle of their life as just like ways of like, you can do this thing, you can buy this thing, and it will make your life more exciting, and it will make you be able to transform yourself and like have new experience in your life, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like you are becoming like boring and you need to do this thing to like improve yourself. And it's like the self-improvement sort of like culture, you know, is like that's not marketed towards young people. That's marketed towards like middle-aged people.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not like these people are dead to that impulse. It's that they feel the impulse and they feel the sadness of not being able to respond to it appropriately because of their situation, you know?
Yeah, it's not like they're perfectly satisfied being, you know, narrow and senile and inflexible.
Right. To me, I guess like I can empathize, I guess, with like the idea of saying that there's like a spiritual death, but like really on analyzing it, I feel like death is far too nice of a word for it because I feel like there's really just spiritual like pain, you know, like they're living the experience of it. They're not dead to it. They just can't respond.
Well, and I think Seth would say like any death is going to have that element of pain because it's not an end to the issues or the challenges that you need to face.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think of like the advertising industry as like being like a touchstone because like they're just trying to sell you something in the end, but like they're wary enough to like tap into like your deeper psychology like that. Oh, these people want to live. Let's sell them this meaningless piece of crap and we'll just tell them it'll do it what they want it to.
I feel like it's one of the like easiest avenues into like a critical analysis of like a culture, right? Is to like see what the advertising is doing.
Yeah.
Where it's like every single time I walk into a bar now, it's like I have to watch a million ads about boner pills. It's like, gee, I wonder what this says about, you know, our society, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, and that goes back to just like becoming inflexible and then just, you know, yeah, the culture will sell you like, you know, the easy way out.
Yeah, they'll tell you the promise of a more interesting, inflexible life.
Yeah. Get a little end of this appendix thing here. The reincarnational structure is a psychological one. It cannot be understood in any other terms. Skipping ahead, the reality, the validity, the immediacy of those lives do exist simultaneously with your present life. The distance between one life and another exists psychologically and not in terms of years or centuries. I just think, you know, hearing that as much as I do, it's always helpful. Down here he says, reincarnational lives are indeed alternate presents. There is interaction between you and the reincarnational selves constantly. There is, as your friend Suwatkin says, constant action across the board. Just a couple other little snippets. Do you guys have anything else in the appendix here?
I just wanted to say in general about the names of reincarnational lives not being too important. Seth has said, I wish I had the quote handy, he has said that his name isn't Seth. You guys just demand a name, and so you guys may call him Seth. But he doesn't have a name because he was like, why would we need names? Why would entities need names?
Yeah, they don't have like verbal language.
Right. They just communicate telepathically, and it's not like an entity is going to forget who their other 4 entity friends are. That you know them even without a name.
It's so curious to me, like how do you come up with something? Is it like completely arbitrary, or is there like some path that makes it close to this more than something else?
You mean a name?
Yeah.
I think he'd at least have to make us something that we can pronounce and spell out phonetically. Just like practical manners.
Yeah. We haven't gotten to a lot, but very frequently whenever there's a guest present for a session, he uses their entity name, and some of them are strange names to our culture, I think.
Yeah.
Do you remember any off the top of your head?
I don't think so. Not like some of the strange ones. They're not all super strange.
I feel like Rupert is spelled kind of weirdly.
It's with a B. It's usually
Or Rupert.
Rupert.
That's kind of a fun name.
Yeah.
I kind of like Rupert.
But even that, it's like it's adjacent to a name that we are kind of familiar with. I mean, even Rupert is kind of at this moment in our culture, I think is kind of a weird name, but
Yeah.
It reminds me of people who do like fantasy writing. It's like you can't have a name that's like too normal, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to be like, this is a completely different imaginary society.
Yep.
But it also like it can't be too weird because like people need to be able to like say it and like think it in their mind easily. So you have to like compromise with like, well, it's kind of like this name that but it's like a couple of the letters are switched kind of thing,
As a writer, I empathize, like you can really agonize over like what a name should be, and like
Names matter.
they matter, so you have to spend time on it. But like for someone like me, is like I don't want to be wasting all my time just finding, doing research and finding the right name.
To me, like, because I always think in terms of like role-playing games, right? Like, to me, like nailing down a character with a name is like one of the most important like moments, where you're like, this is like the thing that we're gonna say this word so often in reference to this thing that like if it doesn't match, it's gonna be such a big deal,
It's a long-running joke in my family because apparently my dad wanted to name me Gerald. And I feel like my life would have been totally different if my name was Gerald.
You are not a Gerald.
Yeah,
You're
not a Gerald at
Oh,
all.
You might be like Jerry for sure, but Gerald.
But do you think
No.
had I been named Gerald, that I would have like grown into anyone's idea of what a Gerald would be? I have to say, like,
I honestly, I do believe in the nominative determinism thing. Like, there are so many times that I've met somebody where I'm like, you are just like the name that you,
yeah,
I imagine there's got to be a lot of dentists who have like the last name, like, I don't know, like Crown or like, I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know if there's anyone with the last name Moeller, but like,
I had an ex who swears her first dentist was named Candace Eater.
Right.
So her name was Candy Eater.
Candy Eater, right?
She sweared that was like literally the truth. Like she wasn't making it up.
It just happens so often that I'm like, I think there's got to be something to it, man.
Like, are you guys familiar with like the Johnny Cash song, A Boy Named Sue?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Basically, it's this big ballad about, how he hates his dad because he named him Sue. But in the end, he realized that it made him tough because he got picked on all the time. And like, I had to name you Sue because I wasn't going to be there to raise you. So
I need you to grow up tough.
So I needed you to get bullied your whole life.
Oh my God.
And then Sue eventually like grows up to be this big mean guy, and he goes and finds his dad and like beats him up.
But it's to illustrate there's some reality to like a name will affect your life potentially.
Yeah, well, and I mean that's why like when people talk about like dead names being like such a big deal, right? Where it's like, when you decide that you're changing your name, like it's a really big deal for people to like acknowledge and affirm that decision. And like, it's not just like, it's not nothing to call somebody by a name that they no longer want to go by, right? Like it really is like a denial of their like identity.
Well, and the resistance you see from some other people, I think points to a recognition that like some of the psychologists that I really admire too will say things like, our own personalities are co-created because we're always doing that in the environment of others. And like even a name, it's your name, but like I'm not trying to justify anyone's resistance for not calling someone their new name when they change it. But like you can kind of see where that may come from because like they're identifying with like that former thing that you all agreed on. You're this,
Right, yeah, like the co-created nature of it makes it like
a
contentious like situation, or like a contentious like point of disagreement where it's like, this is a thing that to become meaningful we have to agree on,
Maybe we should come up with some new podcast names for ourselves.
I think that'd be so bad for what's it called? The search engine optimization?
It would be hilarious though. That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fond good evening.